The people that were kind of OGs, now they're doing Bitcoin treasury companies. It feels like it's been like a little bit of a shift. It does seem like even some of their motivations are being shaped by the immense amount of money that they can make in fiat terms. It does seem like some people are being more drawn into, how can I make more fiat rather than how can we make Bitcoin bring in more freedom. This, whole, we're just gonna conjure more Bitcoin out of thin air. MicroStrategy was able to do that to a large extent, but now you have all these other companies coming on, and we've kind of seen that crumble pretty quickly. I have ETFs just because I have retirement account. In the long run, it's going to make Bitcoin weaker. The more Bitcoin that is captured in these companies, we could lose the overall freedom aspects of Bitcoin. That's where we have the division of those who want to see freedom in the world and those who just want to make more fiat.
Archie.
How do you see what's happening in Bitcoin's culture now with the influx of people from the institutional world?
It's something that I wrestle with, to be honest, because it does feel like Bitcoin's less fun in that aspect. It's less rebel, less cyberpunk. And we always knew the suits would come, but I didn't really foresee the Bitcoiners becoming suits. And I feel like that's what we've seen. And I'm not knocking them for doing that. They're taking advantage of opportunities, but it does seem like even some of their motivations are being shaped by the immense amount of money that they can make. And some of them have kind of, I feel like, become more enthralled with whether it's becoming in the political sphere or just becoming wealthy in fiat terms.
Can you elaborate on that evolution? I'm interested in how, because I wasn't here for it. I have no insight into that, but I'm interested to hear if you would elaborate on that.
Yeah, so I mean, you see it even in a lot of the people that were kind of OGs or that were early in the space. Even in the way they dress, the way they talk, what they're focused on. Before it was very much freedom, money. Now they're they were doing Bitcoin treasury companies and talking about strategic reserves, and we needed to get governments involved. And it feels like it's been like a little bit of a shift. And I think part of that's just practical. That was going to come, but I've been kind of surprised at it's been a lot of the insiders in the Bitcoin space, like I said, donning suits rather than suits coming in and taking over the Bitcoin space.
I guess one argument is that that is an inevitability, the formation of the industry. And so would it not be better for people who have the Bitcoin ethos to facilitate that? Or do you think, have you seen an abandonment? Are they abandoning the values?
It seems a little bit, but and like I said, it may just be like a maturing of the industry and, people are growing up and just becoming more realistic about things. But I really hope that we keep the focus on freedom and actually using Bitcoin as money that's censorship resistant, that nobody else can control, rather than just seeing it as a way to make more fiat. And it does seem like, rich is corrupt. And so I think you see that. I think everybody's susceptible to that. And we'll see how it all plays out. But it does seem like some people are kind of being more drawn into, how can I make more fiat rather than how can we make Bitcoin bring in more freedom.
But you mentioned Bitcoin treasury companies as a kind of symptom of that. Do you see any positives in that?
Yeah, I think there are positives. I think companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, I think that just makes sense. But I think this, whole, we're just gonna, conjure more Bitcoin out of thin air, by this flywheel effect. And, MicroStrategy was able to do that to a large extent, but now you have all these other companies coming on and, we've kind of seen that crumble pretty quickly. Maybe we'll see a resurgence in that. I'm not sure, but it does seem like it's just taking people's focus off of like, let's get Bitcoin being used in the world. Let's make, sure that the world is driving towards a Bitcoin standard, to let's make fiat money. And I just think that is something that we're going to be challenged with.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm wondering whether or not people most of us are drawn to Bitcoin, at least initially, to some extent, and for many people, myself included, to a large extent, because of number go up. There's no doubt about that. That hype cycle draws a lot of people in. Not everybody makes it. but everybody who stays definitely makes it.
Yeah.
And so I wonder whether or not many of these people who were motivated by number go up were essentially just suits waiting for their time to arrive anyway.
Possibly, yeah. I mean, I think it's a mix, and like I said, I'm not meaning to bash on people, but I think it's something that we need to struggle with as an industry. Is, what is the focus going to be? Because sometimes those things are in conflict, and if people are willing to surrender, freedom, if they're willing to surrender, like coming into compliance and AML and KYC and all the things that really take freedom away from Bitcoin, we're going to lose what's best about Bitcoin.
What are your thoughts on the approval of ETFs then?
I think that it was just a natural thing that was going to come. I don't necessarily think that it's a positive or negative for Bitcoin. And I think for a lot of people, it makes, a sense. I have ETFs just because I have retirement account, and it was easiest way to hold Bitcoin. At the time I was doing it, was really the only way to do it without doing a self-directed IRA, which has a bunch of... Anyways, so, I understand the practical implications, but when you hold Bitcoin that way, you lose the freedom aspects of it. And it just becomes like, you're at the mercy of a bank, basically. And so I think that because it is easier for a lot of people, it actually takes people from taking self-custody of their Bitcoin. And I think in the long run, it's going to make Bitcoin weaker.
Do you think it's necessary for people to take self-custody of all of their Bitcoin? And like, perhaps I should set that question up a little bit better, because like Bitcoin has many, many properties.
Yeah.
And the most fundamental of all is that it's censorship resistant, and a whole bunch of things or properties with Bitcoin support that aspect of it. And that's primarily the fact, that's what we want. We want it to be censorship resistant and for no one to be able to control or debase it, right? That's what we want. That certainty and that permissionless nature of it. And so, famously, it's called FU money. Government can't interfere with it, and you can do whatever you want with it. But is it necessary for someone to have all of their money allocated as FU money? Isn't it okay for some of it to be allocated as just number go up money, and then I want to use that for various things in the fiat world rather than just perpetually hold it as Bitcoin? And so as a result of that, like I look at some things like, if you're doing estate planning, maybe an ETF makes sense. If you're someone who's quite elderly and you don't have the competence to manage private keys, maybe that makes more sense. Do you see what I mean? Like there are multiple use cases, and even within your own personal allocation, even if you have perfect competence to manage your private keys, that maybe some of it doesn't need to be managed in that way. You don't need to be fighting the state with your entire portfolio allocation. It's okay. Like, for example, if I owned Apple stock, that's okay. And if I looked at Bitcoin with a part of my allocation as just, I'm looking for returns, isn't that okay too?
Yeah, I think it's okay, but I think that we run the danger of, if the majority of Bitcoin is used in that fashion, then the government has more power to come in and say, okay, you need to have state-sanctioned Bitcoin that's KYC'd, and anybody who's outside of that, we're going to have this is gray Bitcoin, or, black labeled Bitcoin that, all these other institutions are going to be prohibited from accepting. And so I think that the more Bitcoin that is captured in these companies or these formats that are susceptible to, or required to be KYC, AML requirements, then I think that we could lose the overall freedom aspects of Bitcoin. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm not saying it very succinctly, but...
No, I understand perfectly what you mean. I had a conversation with Dr. Jack Cruz. Perhaps you're familiar. I've
done a podcast with him before.
Yeah. Fascinating guy, really interesting character. That word definitely is apt for him, and I loved having a chat with him. I was very grateful for him to... we spoke in Prague earlier this year.
Okay.
It was a very enjoyable chat. And the point that he made was that, some behaviors don't scale. And if we took certain behaviors as an example for everybody to replicate, Bitcoin dies. And I think he's right. He makes a perfectly valid point in that regard. But we also then have a question of personal choice and personal circumstances as well. Like, for example, like what I do isn't necessarily, I don't necessarily have to consider what if everybody did this because it suits me.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you think about that. Like, does every behavior with respect to Bitcoin have to be considered at scale, or is that just like a community discussion?
No, I think there's going to be different things that are right for different people. Even, a lot of people are wholly against having any custodial wallets, and I would take the other side of that. I think that specifically with Lightning use, custodial wallets just tend to work better, and I think it's okay to have your spending money in a custodial wallet. Now, you don't want to hold, the lion's share of your resources in something that somebody can rug pull. And you have to be aware that if you're using a custodial wallet, that service provider could rug pull you. The government could come to them and tell them that they have to give them funds. There's lots of things that you put at risk, but it makes it easier to use. And if you're willing to lose that amount of Bitcoin, then it makes sense to use that. And so I think even when we're introducing people to Bitcoin, a lot of times their first introduction will be a custodial wallet because it's easiest. And then once they start to acquire more Bitcoin, we say, hey, these are the risks of using a custodial wallet. You really should learn, how to maintain your own keys and how to hold your Bitcoin in a more sovereign fashion. That doesn't mean that you can't still put your spending Bitcoin in a wallet. And so when it comes to investments and people thinking more longer term and with ETFs, I still am wrestling with that because I know for a lot of people, they're not going to buy Bitcoin. They're just not going to. It's just overwhelming to them, but they will put it into an ETF. And I think, you want them to be able to have that exposure to Bitcoin. So I think that is a good thing. But I also am very wary of the capture of if we have the majority of the Bitcoin held by, either governments or big financial institutions. Not obviously nobody can stop Bitcoin, but you can make it where if the majority of Bitcoin is held in a way that certain governments say this is good Bitcoin and this is bad Bitcoin, it could make it very difficult if you're outside that system to actually use that Bitcoin. So we don't want to see a system where they have that type of divide.
Well, in the last cycle, there was a guy, a Canadian investor, the Kevin O'Leary, who's on Shark Tank. Are you familiar with him? He pushed very, very hard. He
wants compliant Bitcoin.
Compliant Bitcoin that's ESG friendly because maybe he's got some bloody wind farm somewhere and he goes, maybe that will be priced at a premium because it's ESG compliant. And I'm like, you're such a dubious guy, aren't you? Like, no, it's not going to happen. I mean, I understand what he's doing. Look, he's talking his own book. He's got a portfolio of businesses and some of them.
But here's the difference. He's interested in making more fiat. He doesn't care about freedom. And so I think that's where we have the division of those who want to see freedom in the world and those who just want to make more fiat.